Hi everyone, I hope you're all keeping safe and adapting well to working from home. There's lots of pros and cons to working from home, and some of the things that I'm seeing on my social media feeds are about people's pets and how they're either loving or hating having us around so much at the moment. So I got talking to Sarah Heath, who is a veterinary specialist in behavioural medicine, just to find out a little bit more about actually what effects is this having on our pets, and is there anything that we can be doing? So, Sarah, thank you so much for volunteering your time today. Do
No
you just want to
problem.
start by telling everyone a little bit more about what it is that you do?
Yeah, I'm a veterinary surgeon, as you just said, and specialise in a field called behavioural medicine, which is basically where veterinary surgeons look after the emotional health of non-human animals. So you're familiar with mental health issues in humans, and we deal with emotional illness in non-human animals. And obviously, we do that within a veterinary context. So we also very much look for the link between emotional and physical health. So there's a strong link there, as there is in humans. So there are many diseases, particularly pain, for example, which will cause changes in behaviour. But there are other medical conditions as well, heart disease, for example, lots of things that can influence the behaviour of your pet from a medical perspective. So that when there's a behaviour change, so vitally important to speak to a vet about that first, to make sure there isn't a medical reason. So we provide a referral practice in Chester in the UK called Behavioural Referrals Veterinary Practice, where we work to help owners with animals that are suffering from behavioural change. They're referred to us by their general practitioner. So we're a referral practice. So first of all, you'd go to your general veterinary practitioner, and then they would refer you on to us if they felt that there was an emotional component to the issues that your pet was suffering from.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So we've seen quite a lot of jokes flying about on social media, as I said earlier, about pets that are maybe hating having us around so much, dogs having to go on more walks than they used to, cats not liking us having us in their territory, or some that go completely the other way. But actually, is there quite a serious side to this, and could this be causing some distress to our pets from having us around so much?
Yes, definitely. And as has been in the media about mental health implications of this lockdown on humans, we need to remember that there can also be an influence on the emotional state of the non-humans living in the household as well. So some of the things that are happening because of COVID-19 that might be problematic include having lots more people in the house than usual, where families have come together for isolation reasons and for the lockdown are living with more people in the house, those people being around for longer during the day, those people also potentially being associated with much more noise and much more activity in the household. It might also be that some of the family members are themselves not well, sadly, at this time, or maybe worried and anxious about the situation. So that's causing some level of emotional tension in the household. It may also be there's quite a lot of change in the routine for the animal. So things that used to happen can't, or they're happening at different times or in different ways. It may also be that we are, as you just said, spending more very intense contact time with some of our pets than we would normally be doing. And as you mentioned, for dogs, we've got both sides of the coin. They may be having more exercise than normal, which is something we really need to be careful of in cases where there could be a potential for pain. So an animal that has arthritis, or an older animal, or young animals as well, where they're at developmental stages where exercise needs to be controlled and needs to be of a certain length. And if we're doing excessive amounts of exercise, could be problematic. And then we've got the other side of the coin where we have animals who are having much less exercise than normal, or having that exercise in ways that are not normal, that they're on lead all the time when they didn't used to be, and those sorts of changes. So there are a lot of things happening at this time that could influence the emotional health of the non-humans as well. And what's important is to remember that every animal, like every person, is an individual. So for some dogs and cats, having their owners around more is great, and they're really loving having that extra company. We may be storing up some problems there, which I think we might touch on later. Yeah. But there are some animals for whom this intensity of human presence in the household and the change in ways in which people are behaving may actually be quite stressful for them.
So what about pets on the other side of that scale then? So pets, some pet owners, for example, again, who might be key workers, who would have taken their dogs, probably more specific to this point, might have taken their dogs to an elderly relative to look after during the day, and now are no longer able to do that. So there's some dogs that are spending quite a considerable amount more time on their own. How can we make that transition easier?
I think one of the really important things to think about here is just get in touch with the people you used to leave your pet with and find out what they actually did during the day, because dogs do need to sleep for 16 to 18 hours out of 24. So when they were with other people, they may well have actually been resting or sleeping for a lot of that time. And obviously, it is nice for them to have the chance when they wake up to see somebody there. So it is a change in their routine. It may not be as detrimental as you fear to start with if you have this concept in your head that when they were at granny's they were doing something all day, and they may not have been. So firstly, to remember that dogs do need a lot of sleep, and so some of this time without people in the home may not be disadvantageous. But we also need to think about how we do make sure that they are comfortable, that they're safe, but also that they are occupied to some extent. So the sorts of things we can think about is what are the noise profiles in your home normally, or in the home of the person who used to look after your dog. So do they normally have radio on in the background? Do they normally have the television? Do they normally have music, or do they normally have talking shows? And that sort of thing can still be provided using radio. Just be a little bit careful with televisions, because they tend to automatically shut off after a certain amount of time. So you may think you've left something on and then find actually it was only on for a limited period and then it switched itself off. But just keeping it as normal as possible though. So if you usually live in a really quiet household, or they go to a relative and they never have a radio on, then actually putting the radio on is going to be new and novel and different. And what we're trying to do is keep routines as close to normal as we can. So depending on your situation, noise in the background might be helpful. Think about also occupational toys, so things like puzzle feeders. But again, remember, if they've never seen a puzzle feeder before, you may actually want to start with a puzzle feeder that's really easy. Don't go in with one that's really complex and difficult and might actually make your pet frustrated when you're not there, and that would actually be a problem. So you want to gauge it to your pet. And the same with toys. Yes, make sure toys are available, safe toys that they can play with on their own without anybody present. But again, make sure that you're keeping within the normal sort of routine for your pet and what they are used to. And then when you get home from work, if you're key workers and you're doing an amazing job at the moment, I understand you may be very tired and you may not want to really engage, but think about passive ways in which you can provide play, rolling a ball along the floor where you're still sitting on the sofa, or playing with your cat with a fishing rod toy when it doesn't involve much involvement from you. Think as well about not overcompensating for the fact you were out. So it's a bit of a temptation that the dog's been on its own, you feel really worried about that, and then you engage in really intense play for long periods of time in the evening. And actually that can be a massive change of routine and a problem as far as the dog's concerned, making them in a high state of arousal for too long, for example. So it's tailoring what you're giving your pet when you're not there so that there's as much continuity of what would have been happening if they'd been going to grandma's or to a neighbour's or to a friend's when you were at work.
Okay, great. And what about when we go back to work? Do we need to be thinking about how we make this transition easier for pets that have enjoyed having us here and potentially are going to suffer with some separation when we go back?
Yeah, there are two groups we need to worry about. There are those that genuinely enjoy having you around and therefore going to find it very difficult when you're no longer around. And then there's those who are being more needy because you're around, so they're actually very anxious and worried, but they're spending a lot of that time in close contact, particularly the dogs that are licking you more, leaning on you more, lying on your feet, won't leave your side, following you around the house. That may not be because they're happy about you being home necessarily, but more that they're worried about why are you home and what's happening and why is this odd, and are checking in all the time for information. And both of those populations potentially could find it difficult when things go back to normal. So I think what's important is to take action now, to think about the fact that just because you're at home, that doesn't mean your animal needs to be with you all of the time. And actually making sure they do spend some time alone, whether that's just because you're in your office working from home, or whether you just put them in another room for a short period of time with something to occupy them, like a toy or a puzzle feeder, but making sure that that routine of being alone, even though you haven't physically left the house, obviously, because staying at home is so vital at the moment, but you could be in another room, you could be upstairs rather than downstairs, you could be in your study with the door shut, for example. Just not for excessive periods of time, and introducing that slowly. If you've already been home for a few weeks now and you have had your animal with you permanently, don't go suddenly into shutting them in another room for long periods of time. Do it very slowly and gradually, but think now about what it's going to be like. This isn't going to last forever. We are going to go back to more normal life, and therefore preparing for that now is really important. If you do notice a change in your pet's behaviour at this time, so something different about the way they're behaving, please do ring your veterinary practice. Don't go to your veterinary practice because of social distancing, but do get in touch with them, because remember that behavioural change can come from physical disease as well.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to get an article written up just to have a written version of this as well. So as we've mentioned through the video, I am going to put some links on there. So if anybody wants to reach out and speak to Sarah or her team, if you need any advice, there'll be some information on there and some links to some of the topics that Sarah's mentioned. So Sarah, thanks again. And yeah, if you've got any questions, get in touch.
Thank you.